Well, Mr. Villella, this has been so fascinating hearing you analyze Rubies and your ideas about the horses, the fillies, the jazz influence, the Broadway influence. I mean, it's really just fantastic. All the, as you say, all the layers of Balanchine, and I'm sure we haven't even finished when we say those things. I wanted to mention just a couple of things I don't think you actually had mentioned. One was these occasional Oriental hands, usually to a sort of a minor music. And then this kind of cat's paw thing that you think of in conjunction with nightclubs and so on.
Yes, yes,
I'm sure you never finish analyzing it.
It's, as you say, multitudinous.
Yeah.
And we constantly uncover
Find
layers.
more, yeah. No, it's really great.
And just the quirkiness of a pull-in like that
Yeah.
in a pirouette is something else again. That
Yeah.
is just so
Yes.
extraordinarily fascinating because of its originalities.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, this was certainly one of your greatest roles, and I will indulge myself just for a moment and read one critic's opinion. Edward Villella swoops and punches his way around the stage with an easygoing humor and tremendous virtuosity. Well, I think that says a lot in a very small sentence, because I saw you dance it, and I think that fits you very well. Now, could you tell us about your experience with Mr. Balanchine actually choreographing the ballet?
Well, as any time when you worked with George Balanchine, it just poured out of him. And he would rarely ever say anything about a role or a characterization or relationships or how the ballet was structured or anything that was motivating him for a point of departure. So he kind of left us there. And I think he left us there with great confidence because he knew what kind of job he had done. But he also knew us so well. And he knew all of the best parts of us and the other side as well, but never used anything that was less than your best. And that was the great pleasure of having a Balanchine ballet, because it's like a grand, wonderful tailor molding a suit to your body. And that's what he did with us. And I think out of that, he probably thought, well, I know enough about them to make steps that will be comfortable for them, and by the same token, I can make all of my internal comments and statements. And the fascinating part for us was to find all of those areas,
yes.
and uncover them. I had the pleasure of dancing this, I don't know, 15 years, 16 years or something. And as time was going by, more and more thought would begin to arrive. And oddly enough, most of that would happen on stage.
Yes.
The oddity is you learn so much on stage. And once in a while, if you get into that kind of zone where you're almost observing yourself as you are doing this, and that's a tough place to find, but as you get more and more acclimated to these curious gestures and the curious musicalities, you become more and more comfortable and confident and begin to make internal decision on top of previous decision.
Yes. Well, when Balanchine was doing the choreography, did he demonstrate what he wanted?
Balanchine always demonstrated. He was a phenomenal dancer.
Yes, he could really make the essence of a movement with very little.
He just had all of those mindful abilities, but his body moved significantly. And if you watched close enough, you got it, you understood it. But the other part of it is, if you didn't, he would change it.
I've heard that many times, yes.
An unbelievable flexibility. the fastest feet I have ever tried to follow.
Yes.
They would move in an incredible manner and fashion, and then you'd try to break it down musically. You'd try to get inside the physicality of it, and then you realize you really have to get into the physicality, but the musicality first.
Sure.
And the music will tell us.
Well, when you said fastest feet, he also the most nimble feet. He was so light on his feet.
Very light on
It's
his
just amazing.
feet, and had the most gorgeous hands.
Oh, yes.
His hands were so unbelievably expressive.
Right. Well, you do, of course, a lot of jumps in the ballet, a lot of jumps of many different kinds. To the side, facing backward, with one leg out, with two legs under you, and so on and so forth. In demonstrating that, how much leeway, perhaps, did he give you? And what I'm getting at is that some of the grand jetés, for instance, do not have a straight leg in the back. It's sort of up there. I mean, how precise was he about some of these less than classical movements?
He was very precise, and he would not execute a jump, but he would tell you, this is what I want. I want an attitude here. I want an arabesque with the arm out, or I want an alcigone with both arms up, or pushing away, or something. He was very, very specific about what he was seeking and what he wanted. And again, as I say, it was incumbent upon us to figure out the reasonings why.
Yeah. Now, this was not the first time you danced with Patricia McBride.
No, no. Patricia McBride and
I know you're a great partnership, but there had to be a beginning. But
there was a very wonderful beginning. When she first joined the company, I got to know her, and we were paired together, and we worked very comfortably together.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of working with Patty for almost 20 years, and the pleasure of that was just the pleasure of her. But by the same token, in 20 years, or 18 years, or whatever it was, there was never a crossword between us.
Yes.
She was angelic. She still remains angelic. One of the most beautiful people.
And a gorgeous dancer.
Oh, what a dancer.
She was so idiomatic. Everything kind of flowed through her body.
And the other side of it was partnering her.
Well.
And once you got your hands on her, you know, it's incumbent upon us to support and present. But I think it's always the woman making the initial statement, and it's for us to be prepared ahead to be ready for her initiatives. So Patty was incredible in terms of that kind of musicality and that kind of initiative. So wherein it sometimes looks like it's the guy guiding the woman, quite often, and especially in a Balanchine ballet, it's the woman indicating to the man what kind of help and support she needs. Balanchine had another wonderful phraseology about dancing together, and he would suggest conversation, a small conversation, because we don't grab the ballerina, and it's a delicacy about how we shift and how we begin to understand each other's needs related to the music and obviously the choreography and style and period.
Well, among other things, in most Balanchine partnering, correct me if I'm wrong, he doesn't grab her. As you said, it's very light. Often, it's not even a full, hand. It's fingers, or in this case, as we've just seen, the man has his hand on various parts of her body. In fact, from beginning to end, I think he's all over her body. It seems to me there's this thing with this across the stomach, and at one point he's holding her up by an extended leg, and so on and so forth. I mean, how did he ever figure all this stuff out?
It's called genius.
Yeah, right.
George Balanchine was an absolute genius, but he was a genius who worked at his craft. Every time you would pass his room in the theater, you would hear him taking scores apart, a note at a time. He once told me at any given time he had 20 fully studied scores in his head, so that whenever the time was right, the people were right, the money was right, he could simply just pull out one of these scores and provide us with a masterwork. And I don't know how he thought these things through. I would expect that it was simply studying the script, and he began to have a three-dimensional understanding of the music, of,
Right.
of the notes, and then he could physicalize what we were hearing.
Yes. Well, I read somewhere that he undoubtedly was very familiar with the score, not only from study, but Stravinsky played it all over Europe in the 20s, and a music lover probably couldn't miss hearing at least one of those concerts. So he may have well had that rattling around for some years. Now, the Pas de Deux was extremely successful and made a great impact, in fact, perhaps of the entire Jules, which is in 3 acts, many of which has some lovely passages and exciting passages and so on, but the Pas de Deux was kind of a pow. Why do you think it made such an impact?
Well, certainly both the choreography and the music. That certainly is an enormous part of it. But within the Pas de Deux, he also allowed variations. So we not only had the novelty of man supporting and helping and putting woman upside down and inside one's leg and this and that and the other, but we had all of this sense of three-dimensional structure, and that's the thing that saved me musically, to see the steps, how they were related in time, and then I began to understand his musicality.
Now, you made a film a while ago called Man Who Dances, rather dramatic film, but parts of Rubies were in that sections. And the narrator at one point said Rubies is his most demanding role. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
I mean, out of several demanding roles, I know that.
I was very fortunate to have a lot of demanding roles, but I love that. I love that kind of stuff. But with this particular one, it was certainly because I could move quickly, because I had a jump, because at that time I had learned how to partner. I understood the musicality. With all of that background, all of that knowledge, it is probably the single most difficult piece I ever danced.
Is it possibly also the longest? I'm not sure. I haven't researched this. But
Well, if you examine another work that he did for me, Tarantella,
that's the shortest, but that doesn't mean it's the easiest.
it's under 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm fond of saying it's under 7 minutes unless you're dancing it.
Right.
Then it's like 2 hours. So he could cram an awful lot in, and Tarantella probably the second one to Rubies.
Now, you also wrote a book in addition to making a film, an autobiography. And I'd just like to quote from that for a minute. It says, you say, I felt that Mr. B used everything he knew about me in the pieces, and his intimacy with my technique gave me security. What do you think Balanchine saw in you?
Well, I think he took a look at me and said, this is a very physical kid from Queens, and that it has a bit of that kind of personality. And from time to time, I'm fond of saying that I even think in the third movement, where the principal character is chased by 4 guys.
Which we saw. We didn't see the 4 guys, but we know they were there.
But that's how I grew up in Queens. We all chased each other.
You were in gangs and things. Not
Yeah, so I thought, oh wow, he knows me this well, and
Yeah.
he knows I can run. He knows
Yeah.
I can jump. He knows I.
Because you also were an athlete, were you not? In
Yes.
earlier years.
In earlier years, I won my letters in baseball in high school and college, and I was welterweight boxing champion in college.
Yeah.
Physical, strictly physical, which he understood.
Let's talk about the music. Mr. Stravinsky, Balanchine's inspiration, but a torment for some of the rest of us. It's pretty clear in this score that there's a lot going on at the same time. For one thing, even Stravinsky defined capriccio as a caprice, a kind of a free-form composition. In any case, I'm interested in the rhythm at the moment. There's several rhythms going on at the same time. Now, sometimes Balanchine actually kind of spells it out. In some instances, for instance, the boys in the corps are doing one thing, the girls are doing another thing, and the principals are doing a third thing. So that's at least 3 rhythms going on simultaneously, even if us humans can't quite hear it all the time. Balanchine also sometimes choreographed to the score as written, not as heard. What I'm getting at, however, is how did you deal with this polyrhythm, and did you count? Did you cross your fingers and pray?
I did all of those
Yes.
things. I did all of those things. But the thing I learned to do very early on was to count. And the deal was, when you saw what he was doing, what he would give you would be the counts. He'd say, yes, you end on 7 here, it's 6 over there, 4 over there, and so on and so on and so on. So once you had that form and that structure, you listened, I listened for the counts, because I could not define the music. My ear was, I was untrained, musically, totally, completely untrained. Fortunately, I have a little bit of
Inner, yeah.
Well, as our dancers say, I have white man's rhythm. So I have all of these
Jazz, kind of jazz stuff.
rhythmic
Yeah.
things, and I grew up in the 40s and 50s with jazz and all of that. So all of that was familiar to me. I just had to connect all of that stuff. So the rhythm was available, but I couldn't hear anything. It was like cacophony to me. And it took me at least a couple of seasons until I could hear it.
But he actually gave you the counts. They're quite complicated too, right?
Oh,
Up
very
to 10s
complicated.
here and
Oh, you'll have
fives
an
and-
8, you'll have a 5, you'll have a change in meter here, you'll have a switch back there. It's a mind-driven physicality that we are involved in. And then when you are trying to be the raw material for a genius like Balanchine and Stravinsky, it's awesome. It is terrifying. I was always terrified trying to pick up music until I figured it out, that I had to physicalize what was there. And once I got that physical relationship to the musicality, I could do it. And then as I did it over and over again, I began to listen along with counting. But I never, ever stopped counting.
Sometimes it almost seems that Balanchine was using the dancers as yet another instrument to express music.
Oh, I couldn't agree more with you, and that's why I come to this idea that we speak a physical language. And that's what he's given us. He's given us a brand new physical language. He's given us a brand new American elegance. He's given us that kind of energetic American vitality and speed and confidence.
I thought one of the most touching things in your book was that you said, after 16 years or whatever, after some years, you did not dance Rubies the way you had at the beginning. You danced it very differently toward the end of your career as when you started. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that a little.
Well, I think what we were talking about musically is what followed for me. I could now also listen to the music. Now I knew it so well that my mind now was not occupied by these terrifying areas, and I could simply just get into it and let go. I got into it and let go, but I was still holding back with these horrific fears of not hearing the music. But as I say, if I stayed at it, if I could visually see it, if I could analyze it, if I could count it, I knew the counts, found the structure, it freed me. And that was probably the single greatest pleasure I had later on in my dancing time, was to be completely free. Because I didn't dance between 16 and 20,
Yes.
while I was at college, I had this big chunk of my education, my exposure, unavailable. So it was a struggle for me. And that's why I say later on, once I had acquired the comfort of all of these other areas, I could dance differently. Not that dramatically differently, but I felt it differently.
And I love that your expression also of being almost on the outside looking in. That's a real departure. That's just wonderful.
Well, it's an interesting thought, because we spend our lives in front of mirrors. And I almost think that there's a mirror up there, or sometimes on stage. I felt that there was a mirror up there I could peek into every now and again.
That's quite amazing. It takes a very dedicated and passionate person to be able to continue to find things in the roles and to make comments of that sort and continually renew and revive and examine. And obviously, you're one of them.
Well, it's also the pleasure of it. This is not easy stuff. That's why it takes 10 years to learn it.
Well, right, you can master the technique, even though that's also very difficult, but there's so much more, that's what you're saying.
There is so much more. The internal understanding of those guys.
And I don't think people necessarily always realize that, because it doesn't show exactly what's going on inside.
Well, Mr. Balanchine had another phraseology, which was, we make the difficult look easy.
Dear Mr. B.